Coming up on River City Presents, we're going to be talking sketch comedy with comedian Todd Holloman. Welcome to River City Presents. I'm Daniel Hurt. Sketch comedy is one of my favorite parts of comedy, and joining me today to talk about our top 5 favorite bits from various TV shows is comedian Todd Holloman.
Thank you.
Welcome back, man.
It's good to be back. I had such a great time the first time I was here, especially since that was like the first time I'd seen myself and all the weight I'd gained since I quit smoking. And I was like, I should wear looser fitting clothing. and you were showing these like stills from back when I was in Paducah Improv like 12 years ago, and I was like, who is that thin, handsome young man when the guest is obviously a manatee?
Who is that guy? Yeah. Well, you know, I think that happens though when someone quits smoking. Brian Rader, our friend Brian Rader, has quit smoking. He's like, man, I just want to eat all the time now.
Yeah,
so.
I wanted to, and I did.
Yeah, well, hey, I'd never smoked, but I will tell you this, I still want to eat. So KFC in Princeton's got the buffet. So.
Yes, exactly.
But let's get into it. Why don't you start? We're going to go through our top 5 favorites, no particular order unless
Open
you have
up the
an order.
ballot here.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm going to start with my honorable mentions, just ones I wanted to include but didn't quite make like the top 5, okay? Yeah. And one of those is Chappelle Show, Clayton Bigsby. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about that later, so let me just go ahead and throw that out there. It's classic. Ronnie Dobbs from Mr. Show was a character played by David Cross. He was the most arrested man in America.
I just know David Cross, and that's just...
He had the distinction of being arrested in each of the 50 states.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a very, very famous character, just a drunk dude with no shirt on, you know, screaming, "You're brutalizing me!" You know, stuff like that.
We have many of those in the neighborhood, yes, indeed.
And also the other honorable mention, the Pee Wee Herman Show. Now, I wanted to include that because we recently lost Paul Reubens, and this is the original Pee Wee Herman Show that debuted on HBO back in 1981. This was the adult version of what eventually became Pee Wee's Playhouse. It's an hour long, but it's one long giant sketch, basically, you know, and it is one of the funniest things, and I love it so much.
He was a legend, man.
And so original, and of course, Phil Hartman was a part of that cast, and yeah, it's just great. I don't know if it's still out there or not. It probably is, but
on YouTube or something.
Yeah, absolutely. But don't look up the Playhouse. Look up the Pee Wee Herman Show.
That's right.
And don't show it to your kid.
Exactly right. I remember watching it. I grew up on that one too. But he was a legend indeed.
Well, I'm going in reverse order.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my number 5.
All right.
Which is Monty Python's Upper Class Twit of the Year.
All right. Tell us about it.
It is a kind of an Olympic competition between 6 upper class twits. You know, very, very wealthy British gentlemen with names like Paul St. John Mollusk.
Bernard St. Vincent, yes.
Reginald Smith Smythe Smith. And they're all really stupid. I love anything that makes fun of insanely wealthy people.
Oh,
and the various sports that they compete in include walking in a straight line, waking the neighbors by slamming your car door.
Hey, you know, if you know who your father is, you're just entitled to everything.
Exactly. So. The other ones are get the bra off the debutante, kick the beggar.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Hey, that's.
And the coup de grace at the end, the final thing they have to do is shoot themselves in the head.
Oh my God, that's dark.
Which takes a long time for them to do. Actually, one of them ends up shooting the other one, and
it's very classic. You first,
firing guns in the air.
It's like, you first, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with those kind of bits too, you know, when I think of the rich British guy, I think of yes, of course, the guy that's rich and, you know, went through the university but didn't actually learn anything. So, like, you know, when you come to actually being put to the test for something, it's like, oh, I don't actually know how to do that. Yeah.
These characters barely pass as human.
Yeah, and talk about, like, in terms of Monty Python's humor, like, for folks that may not know, I mean, they're very dry, sometimes
very slapstick. Dry, and also yes, slapstick, but also very absurdist. Some of my favorite things that they did were just completely absurd and had no point whatsoever, other than it was silly.
It was funny at the time. I think John Cleese once said, "Hey, if it's funny, you just do it. It doesn't really matter." You know.
One of my favorite facts about Monty Python is, of course, Graham Chapman passed away years ago. I believe it was sometime in the 90s. And, of course, they're famous for the parrot sketch, which John Cleese goes through all the different ways this parrot is not alive that he just purchased at the pet store. Yeah. So at Graham Chapman's funeral, John Cleese got up to deliver the eulogy and did the entire parrot sketch, except with Graham Chapman as the one who is dead.
They are banging on the counter. It has its maker, so
yes.
yeah. So one of mine, I'll stick with that. So one of mine is Fry and Laurie. Remember the Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie show? People may know Hugh Laurie from House, but he was actually a sketch comedian with Stephen Fry in the day, and the sketch is Psychiatrists. Have you ever seen that one?
I have not.
So the way this one works is they're in a doctor's office and they're both pretending to be psychiatrists. They've got their pipes and they're like, you seem to have a parent problem. Was father bad to you? And he's like, well, no, I don't have but that's interesting that you brought that up. So was there something at home in your home life? And he's like, well, next, the other one says, well, we're going to have you do next time a little drawing. When you don't know who the real psychiatrist is, and they're going back and forth and prescribing each other medicine and telling each other, you need to listen to me. And he says, and at the end of the sketch, he said, well, will you be back for your next appointment? And Stephen Fry said, yeah. So what, does Tuesday work for you? Just go ahead and tell Catherine on the way out. And then what you find out at the end of the sketch is that Catherine comes in, and she's the psychiatrist, and she says, Jim, you're here early, but we're going to take Mark in first. And they look at her, and they're like, fascinating. She's convinced that she's a psychiatrist. I declare, it is just one of those, you don't know who it is until the end. And
I love a good twist ending.
Yeah, and then, but you're watching it, and I remember the first time I watched it was with my brother. We were like, who do you think the real one is? And at the end, we were both wrong.
For sure.
But I love that show. One of the honorable mentions in terms of that is, the way that I like that they would break the fourth wall and admit that they were in a bit. So there was one where Stephen Fry was a barber, and Hugh Laurie comes in and sits down, and he keeps taking aprons off the tower and putting them on him. And he gets like 30 aprons deep. And there's just this big one. And Hugh Laurie says, how are you going to finish this bit? He says, give me 45 seconds, we'll get there. And he sort of comes up with something last minute. There's another one where he says his name is, and he drops a lighter. Have you ever? He's like the sound of the lighter is his last name. My name is Fred, and he says, how do you spell that? As it sounds, naturally.
That sounds like a Steve Martin bit almost. Yeah.
But I was a big fan of Fry and Laurie, so they were good.
Excellent.
Well, what do you got? What do you got next?
Next at number 4, I have from Saturday Night Live, Eddie Murphy's "White Like Me."
Oh, that's a great sketch.
Yeah. If you were alive during the '80s when Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live, it was the Eddie Murphy Show. Let's be honest.
My God.
He came onto that show and it was his show.
Mr. Robinson's
For the 4 or 5 years he was on there, that show belonged to him. And then, of course, he became the biggest star in the world there for a little while. But White Like Me is when he puts on makeup, puts on white face, and goes out into society to see what it's like for white people. Turns out white people can just walk into the store and take things for free.
Yeah.
He goes to the bank, and they just give him all the money he wants and says, don't worry about paying it back.
Yeah.
And he gets on a bus. There's one other black person on the bus, but when they get off, all the white people turn on music, start dancing, and there's drinks. So
now that he's gone, we can have a party because the scary black man's off the bus.
Yes, exactly. And the sketch ends with, he looks at the camera, and there's a bunch of other black people sitting in makeup chairs, and they're all putting on white makeup.
Yeah, because they know it works.
Yeah,
he told them.
He says the next time you're having a good time with what you think is a really keen white person, it could be one of us because we've got a lot of makeup.
Could be a black person disguised. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about that? It's like that. There's a particular part of that sketch too where he's going to get that newspaper, you know, and he's like, "I want the newspaper," and he says, "Oh, I don't have any money." He's like, "Oh, just take it. Just take it. It's okay." And he's like, "I don't know if I feel comfortable doing this," because you know the way that racism is and the culture. It was like if someone, you know, a suspicious black man, as ridiculous as that sounds, but
sure,
it really was the way it was.
And well, I mean, I went back and watched it this morning, and it really hasn't aged.
It's held up
it's
well.
still relevant.
So,
but yeah, Saturday Night Live was about to go away, I think, until Eddie came along, and Eddie was the only cast member in history to host the show while he was a cast member.
I didn't know that. Yeah, he was definitely the appropriate one for that. I could see Adam Sandler doing that too, maybe.
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah.
Next on my list is Mad TV's Dr. Phil sketches. Have you ever seen those?
Michael McDonald, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Not the one from the Doobie Brothers, of course.
No. Although that would be hilarious.
Joining me on the Dr. Phil show. You know.
Let's talk about what a fool believes.
That's it. That's exactly it. Well, he said, so one of the ones I remember watching was he came out, and it was like the set when it was brown and he had the stools up from like late 90s, early 2000s, and he comes out and he's like, "My guest today is Margaret. I understand Margaret hates her kids." And then he's like, "Why don't we welcome Margaret?" And she comes out and he said, "Tell us, Margaret, why do you hate your kids?" And she says, "I never said that." And he's like, "We have a videotape of Margaret talking about her kids," and it shows just a verbatim tape of her going like, "I hate my kids and I wished I'd never had them." And he's like, "What do you have to say for yourself?" You know? And I just love and he tells a story, and I think it's borrowing from a true story. He's like, this woman comes in and she's wanting to have plastic surgery because she thinks she's ugly. And he's like, "That's not a question, honey. You are. I just got to shoot you straight like they do down in Texas." Oh. And then she was like, "Well, what do I do?" And he's like, "Well, affirmation's always good, so I want you to say, state your name and then say, 'I am an ugly woman.'" Oh, God. and you know, but it's
the thing. I can see Dr. Phil doing that. I mean, that's the thing. I'm just caught up now on Doobie Brother Michael McDonald being Dr. Phil now. You know, we have a little saying down in Texas. It's called "taking it to the streets." Y'all will be there.
He said, "What is he said?" He said, "You know, relationships can be tough, and I know you keep forgetting you're not in love anymore, but you know, but you are, okay?
You are. But hey, you know, if you get out of it, all you can say is, 'Shine, sweet freedom, shine a light on me.'"
It's exactly. And one of my other favorite parts too of that is he brings this woman in and she says, "You know, my mother is in assisted living. She needs help and I can't afford it." And he's like, you hear the internal thoughts. He's like, "Think, Phil, think. You're not a real doctor, but it's okay. You can help with this." And then he says, "Well, maybe some family can help." "Well, I'm an only child." "Oh God, what are we gonna do?" And he's like, he says, "How about a community center or a church?" And she's like, "Well, I can't. I'm not affiliated with any." And he said, "Well, let me tell you a story. My grandpappy and I were fishing at a pond when I was a kid, and I fell down and scraped my knee. And my grandpappy said, 'Is the rock okay?'" And then he just leaves it there. And she's like, "How does it help me?" And he's like, "Why don't you just eat your mother?" That's good. And then that was it. And he's like, "That's my guest today." He ends up punching her or something.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But you know, while it's making fun of Dr. Phil, it's also like not far away from the way he's manipulated people. He brings people on, thinks your child's a star, and then he's like, "In real life, we've checked the records, and she's not a star." You know?
Yeah.
It's just embarrassing. What do you got?
Next up, number 3 is from The Kids in the Hall, my personal favorite sketch comedy troupe, and it's called Hillbilly's Problem.
Oh, this is going to be good. I don't know what this is.
It begins with Dave Foley as a farmer going out to milk his cow, and he sees a penny in the hay, lucky penny. And so he bends down to pick the penny up, and the cow kicks him in the head. And so smash cut to the hospital. He's in the hospital bed, and his two brothers are talking to the nurse, asking if he's going to be okay. Now they go home, and they're sitting around the dinner table, and Dave is just, staring into the middle distance, and one of his brothers asks if he can pass the salt. And he starts grabbing, and he can't grab the salt, and this goes on and on. Then
long, awkward reaching.
You flash forward. They get out of bed. He's still at the table trying to.
The next day.
So they call the doctor, and the doctor's like, "What's the problem?" And Mark McKinney and Kevin McDonald play the brothers, and Mark McKinney says, and I quote, "He appears to be having some difficulty getting the salt."
Oh my God.
And the doctor says there's nothing they can do. And Kevin McDonald says, well, at least he didn't used to be smart. And anyway, they come up with a plan. And that plan is take him back out to the cow and let the cow kick him in the head again.
Well, yeah, sure.
Then the next thing you see
kick his brain right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the next thing you see is they're digging a grave. And the last thing you hear in the sketch is Mark McKinney saying, "I always worked on the Flintstones."
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. They tried it one too many times. Dude died, so yeah.
The Kids in the Hall, and they recently came back. They did a new season last year, and it is every bit as good and as brilliant as the original series.
That's your favorite sketch comedy show?
Yes, absolutely.
I've never seen that before. When was it on?
90s. Started out on HBO, and it was on HBO for a few years. Comedy Central used to show the edited reruns back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I'm going to have to check that out.
But it's Dave Foley, Kevin McDonald, Mark McKinney, Scott Thompson, and Bruce McCullough.
Oh wow! Dave Foley's awesome.
Sure. He went after he left. That was when he went to News Radio, which is a genius television show.
Absolutely. I was just thinking in terms of used to be smart. Kicked him in the head. You guys aren't that great either.
Yeah. So. But some Kids in the Hall classic characters. There was the Chicken Lady. I'm sure you remember the Head Crusher. A lot of people, you don't.
Yeah.
That was the Kids in the Hall.
Oh, they came up with
crushing. Yeah.
I've seen that bit on YouTube before, just in general. So CNN did like great comedy bits, kind of like we're doing, and that was one of them. So I'm going to SNL now, because you gotta. I feel like if I've got 2 SNL ones, and I feel like
it's been on for 50 years. There had to have been a couple of funny things.
If you're gonna have one that's a double, a twofer, it's that one. So John McCain sings Barbra Streisand. Do you remember this?
Yes.
So that was my deep cut, the one that I didn't think you'd remember. So the funny thing about that one was Barbra Streisand apparently pissed him off by mentioning what he should have done as a senator when he's running for president. He actually went on SNL and sang Barbra Streisand. The bit was, John McCain sings Barbra Streisand standards, and it's got a picture of him, fake album art, like what she had, and he was like singing Memories, and he was singing them terribly, and it had this like 80s floaty background with stars. It's fuzzy, and he's like, Memories, singing bad, and he goes like, he said, for the last 20 years, Barbra Streisand's been trying to tell me how to do my job, and at the end of the day, I think I've decided that I'm going to do hers. And he'll sing midway through. He'll do, I can't remember the lyrics, like, Papa, can you hear me? Or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And he was like, and he was like, it's annoying, isn't it? And it was just great, of all the political ones to have on SNL, like John McCain, the war hero, you just wouldn't have thought would have done that. But, like, he did. He was really great. It's an amazing sketch.
That is one thing that Saturday Night Live has, both good and bad, been able to get politicians to actually appear, on the show. I mean, how many times was Rudy on that show?
Oh my God.
And in drag. I mean, they couldn't keep that guy out of a dress.
You know, and the other thing,
He just walked into 30 Rock and took his pants off. Was like, I need a skirt.
like, let's put that guy on television. He's already here. George W. Bush actually thinks he said strategery because that scene is so popular.
Yeah.
He was somewhere out in an interview and they said, you know, the Will Ferrell bit about strategery, and he's like, no, I said that. And they're like, no, you didn't. He's like, no, I remember saying it. And they're like, actually, you didn't. But, you know.
7 hours a week. 24 hours a day, you know, or whatever it was he used to say. It was great.
What do you got?
My next one, I also had a twofer from SNL. My number 2 is synchronized swimming. Men's synchronized swimming with Martin Short, Harry Shearer, and Christopher Guest.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. I haven't seen this.
It's Harry Shearer and Martin Short are the first men's synchronized swimming team, and they're wanting to get it into the Olympics. And it's just an interview with them. And Martin Short plays one of the most bizarre, and this is saying something because Martin Short,
weird.
You know, I mean, Martin Short, very weird in this. As a matter of fact, right at the beginning, like within the first minute of the sketch, he turns to the camera and just says, I don't swim. And so when they're performing their routines, he's wearing a life jacket. And they're doing like routines to the Raiders of the Lost Ark theme.
Oh my God, I have to see this.
And Christopher Guest is their choreographer, and you know a lot of it was probably improv. He's like teaching them a routine. It's like, okay, we're going to do a mirror now, and now you point, and you, hey, look at, you know, and they're just doing this. Hey, you, I know you.
Did they keep a straight face?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's one of the filmed sketches,
Yeah,
so I'm sure you know that they were able to cut out much of the laughter, but
I don't swim. Probably gonna get a lot of laughs.
Yeah.
The other SNL one that I have, it's way up there. I talk about this bit all the time, and that's Bill Hader, who again is one of the best staff on SNL.
Oh,
of all time.
Incredible
The
talent.
Dateline sketches that he did playing Keith Morrison. Do you remember those?
Oh, of course.
He's just like, mystery of the chopped up guy. And he's just like, you know, and he says, he interviewed that guy, he's the doctor, there's a witness, and he says, I saw a hand or a head in the water, and he's like, was it like Wilson the volleyball? You know? He was just like, as gruesome the details would come in, he'd get more excited, and they were like, so unfortunately we had to cut open the body cavity, and he's like, yeah, and he's more excited.
Oh yeah, then they'll cut to him eating popcorn. Like, yeah.
He actually did the dirt bike. Yeah. And then the other part of that I liked was that woman, you know, like with any news story, they always bring in someone who's just like completely the wrong person to interview. And
Absolutely.
She's like, I saw the body, it was real big and dirty. And he's like, I must paint you, you know. But the end of it is always great because he does the voices and he's like, he said, I'm Keith Morrison, this is Dateline, and when I was a child, I saw a clown drowning in a swimming pool, and he was just floating. And they did his hands like that. And it was so dark, but it was like, but he's so convincing as Keith Morrison. And
Bill Hader is amazing, and his show on HBO Barry is genius. And have you seen? There is actually a video where Bill Hader gets to meet the real Keith Morrison.
yes, I have. Yes.
And he is so starstruck and just so excited to meet Keith Morrison. It is amazing.
And Keith was like happy to see him too.
Sure.
I mean, you're a very serious person. You probably don't imagine that SNL is going to do a bit about you. You
right.
know? All right. What's next on your list?
My number 1. This is not a traditional choice.
I'm all ears.
Not at all. Some would not even consider it a sketch, actually, but I think it is like the top tier premier comedy sketch because it went on for more than a year. I'm speaking, of course, of Andy Kaufman versus Jerry Lawler in Memphis Wrestling. First off, just an amazing piece of performance art.
Yeah.
Okay. Kaufman and Lawler both completely committed to the bit. So much so that this was back in the days when you could get hit if you said that wrestling was staged.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Even though, now, I got to see Andy Kaufman numerous times because it was Memphis wrestling. They would have matches on Saturday nights. But then every Wednesday night, they would travel north to Evansville, Indiana, and do basically the same show at the Coliseum there.
Oh, wow. And
but this is pre-internet, so there's no way anybody would find out that they were just doing the same show. So when Lawler would fight Andy Kaufman in Memphis, a few days later they'd be in Evansville doing the same thing. And my uncle and I went to every match back when I was in grade school and middle school. And it is to this day just the funniest thing. Kaufman was a heel. He was the bad guy. He insulted the crowd. He had to have
Which
security.
is very him too.
Yeah,
so.
because he would bait the audience, explain to them what toilet paper was because he was from Hollywood, and he would make fun of the accent. Jerry Lawler down there in Memphis, Tennessee, and
just making them mad.
God, yeah, it was just one of the highlights of my life, not only to see it live, but just taking a bit like that and spreading it out like they did over the course of a year.
Instead of one taped, it was the bit everywhere you went.
Yeah, and the only other person who does things like that now, you mentioned her, is Sacha Baron Cohen. Nobody else is really doing that kind of dangerous comedy that could actually get you hurt.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And Kaufman was a master at it. Now, it did end up ruining his career, but
but it was funny.
It was funny at the time for those who were in on the joke.
Well, I think of Andy Kaufman, I think of like the "Here They Come to Save the Day."
Oh, the
thing.
Mighty Mouse theme. Yeah, he did so many
him
great
fighting
bits.
on Letterman, like
that was him and Lawler.
Yeah, so that was the same thing. Yeah. But so he took that on the show too. So.
Absolutely.
But my number one, which we anticipated earlier, was Dave Chappelle. Chappelle Show is one of the greatest sketch comedy shows of all time.
Brilliant stuff.
And my favorite is the Clayton Bigsby sketch, which is, it would never make it in today's time, probably.
I mean, what can you say about it? It's probably the best sketch about racism I've ever seen. It's shocking, but it's also hilarious.
Oh my God!
And they got the actual frontline,
the real frontline guy. Tonight on Frontline, Clayton Bigsby. Yes, it's about a black man who is blind, who was raised in the Deep South, and they have convinced him that he is white. He has become a bigot.
He is a black white supremacist.
Yeah, he has become a bigot.
And when he is revealed at a book signing, and I can't name any of the books that the character wrote.
They're extremely racist books about. Yeah.
But he is unmasked from his KKK robe and hood.
It's a Klan rally.
Yeah. And people's heads explode, and
it's a violent bit, but yeah.
My favorite, it does not pull any punches.
Oh no,
it follows that conclusion all the way to the end, where the last thing you find out is that he divorced his wife because she was married to a black man.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the funny part was they interview those country guys and they're like, well, look, we know he's black. They don't know he's an inspiration to the movement. So we just don't take him around anywhere. There's that clip where they're at a gas station where these white guys are going to harass him because he's black. And they're like, look at him over there. And he's like, let's get him. There's a black person over there. Let's get him. And they're just like, but okay, and they were completely confused. But in terms of, I mean.
And that was on episode 1 of Chappelle's Show.
They probably thought they were going to get canceled.
Yeah. I mean, I think he even says that before he shows the clip.
But the thing that's so amazing about that is they got the real frontline guy to go along with it, though. I mean, that in itself is pretty impressive.
It is. It is comedy. It's kind of a work of art, really. Yeah. I mean, that is as good as sketch comedy can be.
And I have found that I've made reference to that bit many times when you see like a black leader who seems to take issue or support Confederate or classic white supremacist lines.
Sure.
And it's like, it's not uncommon to hear someone on CNN or something say, "Oh, that guy's doing a Clayton Bigsby. He's a black leader who is completely against civil rights, or appears to be."
Absolutely.
And so I that was one of my favorites. Those are all excellent sketches, and I hadn't seen some of those, so I'm going to take a look at them.
Same. So I'm going to look up the ones that you had that I had not seen.
But it was a pleasure having you on. This was a lot of fun. We got to do it again. Do a different top 5 or something else. So.
Absolutely. I'm totally down for that.
All right, man.
Now here's Michael McDonald as Dr. Phil.
That's going to be a bit, I got to tell you. But anyway, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
All right. That was my guest, Todd Holloman, comedian. We talked top 5 favorite comedy sketches. Thanks for watching, and join us next time.